Today, my epic guest is William Whitecloud. I invited him on the show because I had a couple of random coincidences that once they happen multiple times, I realize they're not a coincidence. So I dive into that on the podcast today. But anyway, I hadn't heard of William, and due to these coincidences, I found out about him and then went to his website, and his website said, "Unleash your genius and master the human journey." And I wanted to dive in, obviously, what all that meant as well. Listen to a podcast and then invited William onto the show today. So I have no doubt you will get a lot out of it. If you enjoy the show, of course, please leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're iTunes, Spotify, wherever it might be. I'm forever grateful as we connect on the online space. Also, if you're new to my work, we offer a free 7 days of meditation where there's a link below. You can grab that. It's a great place to start. 3 short meditations a day, which will help you start to dive into the work. And of course, we offer full immersive retreats and workshops all around Australia as well. So if any of that interests you, jump in below as well. Anyway, let's go over to William Whitecloud. Enjoy. William, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Guy. Thanks for having me. And hello, everybody on the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Just a little backstory. I was in my local village a few months back, and my daughter ended up playing with another 2-year-old daughter by the post office, and I got chatting to her mum, and her mum was there, so the daughter's grandmother. I'd never met them before, and we got chatting, and they asked me what I did for a living, and the next thing you know, she lit up and said, "Oh, have you heard of William Whitecloud?" And I was like, "Oh, I've heard the name, but not familiar." And she was a raving fan of your work. So when these synchronicities start to happen, it makes me want to look into it. And then, honestly, William, about 2 weeks later, I was running a retreat up here near Mount Warning, and I walked into the back storage room, and there's a window there, and it had a small little poster of William Whitecloud, The Magician's Way, in the storage cupboard. And I was like, that is no accident. His name has come up. So that's what prompted me to reach out. I was like, I'm getting messages here from everywhere. So hence why you came on today.
Well, that's a great story. Yeah, that's how it happens. If it happens once, it's never going to happen again. But if it happens twice, it's always going to happen again, right? So anyway, I'm very glad to be here and to meet you, Guy. I know you talk to a lot of people, and very privileged to be your guest.
I always ask everyone the same question starting, is that if you were at a intimate dinner party and you sat next to a complete stranger and they started prodding you what you did, what would you say?
Well, I get asked what I do often, right? And I know how to answer that by now. Look, I'm a creative development trainer. I train people in creative development, and what that means is that the levels of creativity. And academically, I mean, it's a bit of a new science, so it's not that well established. But already there's some kind of agreement that there are levels of creativity, and they delineated something like this. There's a few more other nuances to it, but I'll just give you the basic delineations, which is unskilled imitation, skilled imitation, low-level derivative, high-level derivative, innovative, inventive, and genius, right? So you can see that the ascending order, the way those levels of creativity ascend, you become much more self-referenced. So at the level of imitation, you're copying and you're listening to and you're observing and you're learning everything from outside of you. Nothing's originates from within you. So you borrow from the outside of you. And not only from other people and other things and that, but you borrow from the past, from your experiences as to guiding you on how to operate in life. And then you ascend the levels of creativity and you start getting derivative, which means now it's partly you, but still partly drawing on your outer influences, your external influences, and your past, etc. But once you start getting up into innovative, inventive, and genius, there is a dictionary definition that defines genius as not having to learn anything outside of yourself. That what you do is not learned from anybody or anything outside of yourself. So if you get like
Huh.
real prodigies like Jimi Hendrix, say, he played sounds that had never been heard before, that he never copied from anybody. People now obviously copy him. A lot of people, Robin Trow, a lot of guitarists copied him. But he never copied anyone else. He created completely new sounds that he made up. And we all know, well, those of us my age anyway, know that Jimi Hendrix even played the guitar in an unconventional way that other people don't play chords that way, and whatever, right? And so that's an example. And so the more creative you are, the more self-referential you are, funnily enough, believe it or not, right? So you see, so then further to that, what's also observable, self-evident, and can be demonstrated, and it's a case I make in my book, Secrets of Natural Success, is that the higher your level of creativity, the closer you get to genius, the more self-referential you are, then the more successful you are at whatever you undertake. And that's success of any kind, right? It could be the achievement kind, it could be the material kind, it could be the money-making kind, but it could be the artistic kind, the relationship kind, the quality of life kind, the health. I think you're interested in health. And whatever you're involved in, you're just going to be naturally much more successful the more creative you are in that sense, right? And you mustn't confuse it with IQ genius, because sometimes people say to me, I'm a genius. Technically, I'm a genius. I'm Mensa and all that, but my life is screwed up, right? You see, so we're not talking about intelligent quotient in that sense of the IQ sense of the term genius, right? The rational sense. We're talking about the self-referential sense of the word. And then you're going to see that people on that level of creativity are very successful in what they undertake. And so that's what I mean by creative development. Well, first of all, it's what I mean by creativity. And I serve people being more creative in themselves so they can be more successful in their lives.
Amazing. So
Plain and
just
simple.
yeah. So just to repeat and get it back, so I'm clear, and the listeners, then we're using creativity as the vehicle to find our creative genius, or discover, or allowed to come through more, which becomes the moment of where, like you say, it's more self-taught. We're not using others or leaning into, and we're in the zone of genius, if you like. Would that be an assumption?
No, it's I don't know. I don't think you got it. Like in what you just said now, that we're using creativity to become creative. Um, it's a mode of operations, a way of operating, whereby the way we operate, what we go for in life, we guided by ourselves, and by ourselves internally, rather than be guided by external factors, and also past experiences, our beliefs and so forth. So that we come from an internal sense, our own
Mm-hmm.
internal sense of reality, of what we're going for, and realization, connecting dots that aren't normally connected, because that's the definition of creativity, really, in a sense. If you think about it, they say that creativity is the ability to connect dots that haven't been connected before. So if you look at a great artist like Andy Warhol, and you look at what he creates, and I'm in LA, so there's a lot of art galleries here, the top art galleries of the world, LACMA, the LA County Museum of Art, or the Getty Museum. You go and you see these artworks by Andy Warhol, for instance, you see, and you look at them, and there's the work of a genius. It's unlike anything anybody else. It's a perspective that's completely original that nobody else has ever come to or used. It's a very fresh, unique, original perspective that is underived or unimitated from anything. It originates within the artist purely directly, and they use that. They take those dots they've connected and use them to create whatever they're creating. And you know, so it's when you formulate your vision derived from your own inner sense of vision, and then holding that vision also derive your own sense of orientation and how to go about that, and you know, the way to create that, you see, and that's that those internally, those dots coming into perspective and then being connected, that's creativity.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. I just want to clarify a couple of things as you speak, just to ensure I'm understanding it in the right context, I guess. You know, because quite often as well, over here with our work, sometimes people come in and think of creativity. Well, I'm not a creative person. I'm I'm an accountant, and I
Yeah.
just do, you know, sit in front of a desk or whatever that might look like, and then we can close ourselves off to that inner self that you speak of.
Well, that's right. And you know, people think of it as creativity as being artistic. And you know, I used the example of Andy Warhol, and it's unfortunate that I did that because that's the cliche, that it's artistic, right? But it's a way that we can illustrate it. But on the other hand, you can apply it to anything. People are creative in all different kinds of ways. I mean, you know, people are highly creative in sports. You know, people, you can play sports in a low level creative way, or you can play sports in a genius way, right? Soccer or whatever it is. You know, and there are tennis players and all that. There are coaches, golfers, all of that. There are people that serve sports people playing using their genius, you know, using their high level creative function to operate, right? Rather than be in the remote mechanical process of those sports, you see. And they you know, they're highly effective. There literally are mindset coaches that are not teaching the person the mechanical aspects of the game. They're teaching the person their creative relationship to the game so that their natural ability fires at its highest capacity. And then you see it in business like Steve Jobs or Richard Branson. You see it in authors like J.K. Rowling or whoever, right? You know, the idea that nobody, you know, not everyone's creative, that it applies to the arts, they're all fallacies. I can assure you that everyone is genius. There's nobody on earth that is not a genius. Everybody can, you know, it's not fixed. Like I think IQ possibly is. You know, the old sort of measurement of intelligence, the IQ. You know, like you've got an IQ of 100 or 130 or 150. That kind of rational mechanical computing power in your brain, that thing, that may be fixed. Jury's still out on that, I believe, but it may be fixed. But you know, super conscious creativity is not fixed. You know, you set it through your conditioning and your experience in that. you actually set it, but you can reset it very, very well, relatively easily.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. And when did you start looking at this work on your journey, William? Because I've heard you speak about, you know, half of your life you lived a certain way, and then you got to a stage where you really became ferocious to look into this work.
Ferocious.
And
I
yeah,
became a beast. Uh,
a beast.
a beast. Yeah, no, I mean, I had a shit first half of my life. I'm not being a martyr or a victim or thing. It's just fact, right? Um, I, because talking about genius and intelligence and all of that, um, I had an experience growing up where, who knows why, because I don't think he did it with any of the other kids. My father picked on me and made me believe that I was stupid, like really stupid, that I was a moron, and that I had no, brains at all. And I sort of took that on, and belief creates reality. You see, is if you've given some kind of belief, then that belief will perpetuate in your life. So that belief perpetuated, that sense of self perpetuated school, and it was compounded by teachers that I had that picked on me as well, and really singled me out, and for, I would call it bullying, abuse. Really, nowadays we understand it as that, and really humiliated me, and made me out to be really stupid, and so therefore terrified of using my own capabilities, my own intellectual capabilities, and all that. And I actually grew up believing that I was that I was stupid, and I never, as a consequence, I never finished high school. Didn't learn much. I never read. I wasn't well read, or I hadn't read much at all in my life. Um, and so then I had this experience of myself, or sense of self, and experience, by the way, that I was stupid, and so life was very tough for me, because as an uneducated person with a very big inferiority complex, I like my survival, my certainty, my viability, shall I say, in life was, to me, very precarious as to how I could survive and manage. And it was very tough. And then um, I had it, it caused me to have a really rough life. And then I got very ill, and nobody could diagnose the illness. Um, Nobody knew what was wrong with me, but I just kept getting more and more sick. And then it had a lot of horrible physical and psychological symptoms, whatever the condition was. And then nobody knew, nobody could help me, nobody could treat me. And so then I used to self treat myself. I used to self medicate, and using substances and drugs. And I had a lot of run ins with hardcore drugs, and dealing with addiction, and all of that. And then, descending down to practically my deathbed, literally, really. I mean, I was on my deathbed, and something incredible happened to me, in which I recovered miraculously. No one helped me. No one treated me, because nobody knew what was wrong with me. And I saw, medical professionals, and even alternative healers and everything, all over the world, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me, or offer a cure or a treatment to anything. And from a point of where I was at rock bottom on my deathbed, I recovered miraculously. I revived and rebounded back to life and health very instantaneously. Um, and
Wow.
from that, you see, from that experience, it's a bit of a story, and I don't want to take up the time of the interview here to tell the story. People can read about it in my book, Natural Success, The Secrets of Natural Success, because I recounted the story there. But the important thing was the conclusion that I came to, because something in me recognized that my focus had changed. My focus had changed. And that clearly I realized that my focus had been from the time I started getting sick, and this is over a 10-year period, from the very beginning. And as the illness progressed, I became more and more obsessed with not being ill. And then in the end, fearing for my life, obsessed with not dying, and then started dying. So the more I was focused on what I didn't want, the more it came on. In the end, I recognized that and as I say, people can read about it in The Secrets of Natural Success, but I recognized in the end that what changed was my focus. I no longer focused on what I didn't want, that negative vision. I didn't have that negative vision anymore. And once that focus changed, my experience changed. Now, I had never studied personal development or creative development or spiritual development. I had no ideas about consciousness and how consciousness worked. But it absolutely dawned on me that my focus creates reality. And I didn't understand how my focus creates my reality, but I knew that that's what it was, that somehow my focus creates my reality. And so then I determined to learn how the hell this works, because I'd been alive for 35 years or so by that time, right? And I figured life's been pretty shit for me, and extremely shit, really, in many times, oftentimes, and whatever. And so I determined, well, if my focus creates reality, how do I find out about it? How do I work it? How do I use it so that my focus and I wasn't expecting to become successful and rich and whatever, but just how can I use it, this understanding of how my focus creates reality, just to be healthy, just to be sane, just to be happy, to live a decent life, to be just moderately, to have moderate well-being in life, And anyway, so then that led me to discover that there's a lot of knowledge about this in the world and in life, and that there's a huge lineage of this understanding of how your focus creates your reality, that humans have understood this for thousands of years, and practiced this ability of self-consciously and in a self-aware way, using focus to create reality and to create the reality of your choice. And I mean, mainly that has been carried through the principles of alchemy, which most people are mystified by and imagine is an arcane kind of study, maybe take it very literally, like that it's these weirdos that sat there trying to turn lead into gold with all of their equipment and all that in the Middle Ages and all that. But it's actually not. Alchemy is our long-standing understanding of how we create reality with our focus, and that reality follows focus. Where our attention goes, so there goes the reality. So I've been a student of alchemy and creating reality for 30 years, and a practitioner of it. And so that's my origin story, Guy.
Amazing, incredible. I need to ask you, like, because I just think of people, that I come across in my world, like, did you need to go to rock bottom, I guess, to then come out the other side? Because quite often we see people that have their challenges and like you say, continue to fixate and focus on the problems, not the solutions, and we perpetuate those problems even more, like you spoke of then. What allowed you to really shift the focus to be solution orientated and outcome orientated without slipping back to the old self? Because I see it so often here.
Well, you see, the thing is that's another myth that I'd really like to dispel, because I often hear that is, oh yeah, but you went to rock bottom, so that's what did it. But that's why I'm here, and that's why others like me are here, so people don't have to go to rock bottom.
Mhm.
That they can just in a normal ordinary life undertake a study of how consciousness works and how our creative nature works, and use that for better results. So it's like, as we were talking about before, Richard Branson didn't have to go to rock bottom to become a genius businessman. Genius golfers and tennis players, all that, can be taught to be genius golfers and tennis players. They don't have to nearly die for that to happen. You see, we can just do it out of choice, right? And the proof of that is I've taught thousands of people, and I work over my time and over the last 30 years. I've worked very closely with hundreds of people, literally hundreds, one on one, for years. Like right now, I've got coaches. I'm coaching people that have been with me for 4 or 5 years. So I work with people over a long period of time. And those people were not people who are like in trouble, hitting rock bottom or anything. They're just people who recognized that their limits to their ability to create whatever they're involved in, whether that's business or art or whatever, right? And they're just looking for a way. There's a sense in them that, yeah, there's more to me. There is more, but I've reached the limits of what I can create, you know. And so they come to me, and they're not, as I said, they're not on rock bottom. They're not dying of some illness or something, but they're just existentially dissatisfied, right? And they just go, yeah, it's good, but I know there's more. And they come to me, and then they learn how to expand, expand that using their consciousness, using their focus. And a really good example was this guy came to me a little while ago, not more than a few years ago, and he was a businessman, an entrepreneur, and he was making $3 million a year in his pocket after expenses and all that. That's what he has taken home from his business, about 3 million a year. But he was working 16. He was well. He wasn't unhealthy, anything like that. And he was actually very well, very healthy, very fit young guy, and intelligent and hardworking. But that was his problem. He was working 16 hours a day, and he was making 3 million. And he's going, how can I do better than this? Because I've just reached the limit of what I'm doing. And I'm working 16 hours. I can't work more than 16 hours a day. And I swear to God, this is true. He now works 2 hours a day and makes $30 million a year.
Wow.
You see, and so, you know, it does happen that people, not all people, because some people hit rock bottom and crash and die, right? And sadly, but also for some people like myself that hit rock bottom, they in a way forced to come to terms with themselves and reality and all of that. So you can see a big transformation in our lives, right? But it's not necessitated by desperation, and the most preferable way for it to be come about is not through desperation, but just the desire to realize your own potential, and what can be done with that potential. In my own case, you see, what kept me going was what kept me going and still keeps me going was that incredible turnaround, that miraculous, unbelievable turnaround from a shitty descent into hell and darkness. Because I'm not exaggerating. Again, I don't want to be a victim and a martyr and all that. I'm just telling the truth. Is like when I hear people's rock bottom stories and bad stories and all that, it touches me and affects me. But I don't hear stories where I go, wow, that's bad. That's worse than what I went through. You know. Um, and so to go from that really awful condition and experience to miraculously turn around to be well again, and um, in every sense, emotionally positive, and feel like I got something going for myself, from those depths of despair. I wasn't that motivated by the reversal and how good I felt, and wanting to stay that good. I mean, I was, but I was much more fascinated. Something in me was triggered, was piqued. It was like, what the hell is this thing, and how the hell does it work? And I just absolutely intrigued and fascinated, and I've remained fascinated for 30 years, right? And that's why I write books, to share my findings, because that's what I do. I just continue to refine my knowledge, find out more, find out on deeper levels, and share that knowledge. And in a way, for me, my life has changed. I'm blessed because I've been blessed with really good health since then. I've been blessed with you know wealth and abundance in every sense, like the fulfillment of doing great work, being pretty well off, great relationships, all of that. So it's a fabulous reward, but it's not what motivates me. I don't know. Maybe I'm different than some people who who find that their reward in life, how much money they'll have, how much they'll be loved, and all that, which are beautiful things. Don't get me wrong, but it's not what I go for. Like the thing that drives me like crazy is getting to the bottom of this. I would call it like reality of the creative condition of human beings, because we are supremely creative organisms. We're creating machines. And if people only knew that you create everything that's happening in your life. And the deeper down the rabbit hole of this work that you go, the more true you realize that to be, is that you're creating everything based on where your attention is, pure and simple. So you learn that you are creating machine. You're creating everything. As Baird T. Spalding said, he said, "It is said that we succeed at everything we undertake. And when we undertake failure, we succeed at that too." Now, you don't undertake failure self-consciously. No, I don't think many people do. I don't think many people go set about to fail. But there's something almost intentional about failure when you see it structurally, right? And from the point of view of focus, that we are beasts, we are creating machines, and it's our attention that is creating. And it's an incredible realization, and particularly when you start using it to affect reality, when you start using it to be the predominant creative force in your own life, which means that the way your life turns out is how you determine it, how you shape it, how you decide it, rather than that you a victim of circumstances, of the economy, of other people's attitudes, the weather, whatever, all of the conditions outside of you. The average person, their life is herded and shaped by that, by circumstances, when it needn't be, because you can be the as I say, the predominant creative force in your own life. You can't be the absolute creative force in your own life. Like, then you'd be God, right? But you can be the predominant creative force in your own life, where you can learn to focus in a way that reality has no choice but to turn out the way you want it to be.
And that's extremely powerful when I listen to you put it like that, William. It's, it, who wouldn't want that at the end of the day? But I think, like, even for myself, for a large part of my life, I wasn't even aware that was possible. It didn't even occur to me that you could go in this direction. I had to get knocked around in my own life a little bit to start really wanting to look at all this kind of work and these principles, and start to actually incorporate them in my life and see what showed up. But for me, it was a very scary thought, though, as well, at the same time. I don't know if you find that on this journey for people, and that's why I was always curious about the pain first. They say the pain pushes until the vision pulls, and as we get excited by a future self and start to really invest in that, then reality can happen.
Yeah, but that's a terrible motivation, pain, and getting away from pain.
Absolutely.
That's what we call a negative vision. You see that what motivates you in life is what you want to get away from. And most people don't realize how negative their vision is. They just want a lot of money, or the old classic thing. They are the soulmate, the twin flame. I want my twin flame. I want my soulmate, and I want money. All these sorts of things, and they genuinely. I don't want to mock anybody, because people genuinely feel that's what they want. Little do they realize, unconsciously, it's driven by their insecurity, their financial insecurity, their own loneliness, their desperation, or whatever, right? And that's a terrible motivation, because the power, the attention is still on the negative condition, right? And so you learn to be motivated, you learn to discover the most powerful and sustainable creative condition, is going to be created by the realization that you have a heart, that you are pure creative spirit connected to everything through all time and space. And that paradoxically, even though you're one with everything, you're also very unique. You have a unique nature, you have a unique purpose on earth, you have a unique mission on earth, you have a unique expression, and you have gifts, talents, and abilities that are designed to support that expression and that mission, right? And when you get in touch with that, then you find a higher and stronger motivation than your pain. Pain is a terrible motivation. It gets people off their asses, make no mistake. But long term, people don't get further. I'm just going to do a demonstration. Sorry, I just had to grab a few elastic bands to demonstrate this. Because this is your pain here. This is your pain. And this is this is your vision. You want to go over there and make money and get your life together and get a relationship and all that, but born of your pain, and now you're going there. Well, the attention is still here, right? And so then it's, your subconscious is focused on that, and it's going to pull you back. And that's why you see people stuck in their lives, or their lives oscillate forwards and backwards. They don't really ever exit that matrix that they're in. You see, this elastic band is the borders of the matrix that you're in. You're in that matrix. And you tug this way, you tug that way, but you're not out of the matrix. You've got to get out of that matrix, outside this rubber band, outside. And what does that is positive vision, is when you connect with your higher nature, your true purpose, your heart, the things that you're inherently involved with in life, connected to, that really actually matter to you, right? and you find that, well, then you have found the you know you found love. You've found the thing that is higher than pain, is stronger than pain, is permanent and lasting, and keeps you on a permanent and lasting track. And if I can use myself as that kind of example, because from that rock bottom, I never went back to that rock bottom. My life has been on an up and up trajectory for 30 years. Yeah, I reach plateaus. Maybe I go back here and there and whatever. But generally, the trajectory of my life is on just on the up and up all the time. And it's because I've found something far more interesting than my pain, that far more motivating than my pain. To be honest, I really mean this. And people that I know and work with and that I teach and empower, and that they're really not interested in their pain. It exists and whatever, but it just doesn't matter. It's there, and we don't mess with it. We don't need to fix it, right? We don't pay attention to it. We involve ourselves in what matters to us in a much more compelling motivation, leading to much more positive outcomes in life that then heal us at the same time without us even trying. We just become more and more healed. So that's part of my message, is that pain is a yeah, I understand it. It gets people off their arse, but long term, it's a very dysfunctional motivation that doesn't really take people anywhere. It just keeps them locked really in their old beliefs, their old conditions, etc.
No, I hear you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, just listening to you and reflecting on my own journey of wanting to, listen to my heart, connect with that higher intelligence more, and live through purposefully, meaningfully, and focused, like you say, attention. But what I found was that there were points of wobble along the way where, it felt so strong in my heart, but then the old conditioning would arise and think, oh, well, maybe you're not worthy, maybe you shouldn't be doing this yet, and the fears arise. And I found that I needed to find courage to step in and actually start to get that momentum and leave the old stuff behind and not even focus on it. But there was still a point in my life where I wanted to flip back.
Sure.
Where it was there,
Mm. Well, I understand that. The illusion is very strong, and it never leaves, right? And the illusion is very strong. And when you're in an illusion, you are subject to very heavy negativity, right? And fears and doubts and reservations and all of that. And you experience yourself as limited, you experience yourself as separate, and you experience yourself as powerless. And then you need those what I call false energies, confidence, courage, all of that, right? You need that. And again, they are not inherent powers. They sort of like artificial stimulants, if you like, really, right? You see, and this is why creative development is awesome, because it introduces you to your genius, to your high level creative function and perspective. And then what we have is the tools and the ability to shift into our high level creative function, into our high level creative perspective, into our genius perspective, into the part of us that truly is not making it up and it's not just theory, the part of us that's truly connected to everything through time and space, that is one with everything, that is not limited, that is not powerless, is not separate. Like we one, so the ability to connect with your superconscious genius and then have that perspective then neutralizes your low-level consciousness perspective, right? Your egoic sense of separation, limitation, powerlessness, fears, doubts, reservations, whatever, right? When because when you see it from the perspective of your own superconscious genius, from superconscious perspective, those low level doubts, fears, all of that, they're your belief system. They're your belief system, right? And your belief system exists for a purpose. Your ego exists for a purpose, right? Because a lot of people don't understand this, what the ego really is. Your ego is your sense of individuality, right? It's a construct it's a mechanism that creates a construct, which is the idea of you as an individual that's separate from everything else. And it's a good thing. People hate the ego, but the ego is a good thing because it gives us our individuality. It exists for a purpose. Otherwise, we would have no sense of ourselves. We would have no individual sense of existence. We'd be like, a colony of ants or bees that the hive, the queen has the mind, and then we all just go out like robots and do whatever, go and defend the perimeter, go there for food. We'd have no free choice. We'd have no will. We'd have no independent taste, expression, anything like that. We wouldn't be human beings without an ego, right? And what the ego does, it gives us that individual sense of existence. It makes us feel like we are we and we are not connected to anything else. We're separate from everything. And our belief system creates that separation, right? And it's good. It serves us very well in feeling like, I am me. I feel very me compared to you. I look at you there and I go, yeah, I'm not that guy. I'm me, and he's not me. I'm me, right? But that's an illusion, particularly in a sense of our oneness and our power and creative capability. We are not limited. We are not limited. We are not separate, right? And so the ability to go into the part of you that knows that truth for real, not as like a fancy, false affirmation. I am one, I am one, I am rich, that's false bullshit, right? No, for real. So you occupy that side of yourself, and that neutralizes the illusion. Then you don't need courage, you don't need confidence, you don't need these false stimulants, I mean, I just spent 30 days. I just spent 7 days with my top 30 clients in a retreat that I held for them up here in California, in the Sierra Nevada, in the Sequoia National Park, right? Beautiful, just stunning. And people were sharing their experiences. And one lady really, I mean, everyone had stories that could just blow you away. But the one woman in particular had this story that was just absolutely remarkable, because her businesses predominantly were in the hospitality industry. And when the pandemic hit, her business partner chickened out, shat himself, and stole the money from the bank account, drew it all out, didn't take half, like I'm a 50% shareholder, so therefore I'll take half of it. Took all the money, all the operating money of the whole company, of all the enterprises, in a business where they were being forced to close, right? So pubs and restaurants predominantly being forced to close, shut down, right? And this guy, he's in his pain body, he's in his fear body, right? In that egoic orientation, that sense of limitation, reservation. I can't survive this. I got to just steal this money, stash it away because I can't survive, right? And leaving my client with these businesses with no operating cash, no operating money, in an environment where they're being legally forced to close down for years, right? She, however, stepped into her super conscious vibration, self, whatever you want to call it, like into her genius, where she saw reality from the perspective of her higher self, her genius, her creative self, right? And wasn't in fear, didn't panic, all that, right? And instead determined to keep every business open and keep every single person employed. And by the way, that was her motivation, you see, was to be in service to the people in her companies that work for her. So her motivation wasn't to protect her money, to make money, anything. It was just to protect the people, like to keep them in jobs, and so in service to these hundreds of people that she looked after. And she got them all together, focused them, got them into their creative minds, and focused them on what the opportunity was, what possibilities, what dots could they connect and stay alive. And they made more money in the pandemic with the businesses closed than they ever made with the businesses open. They did all kinds of things, deliveries. I won't bore you with all the different things they did, but they came up with millions of things. Well, not millions, but dozens of things to do to keep services to happening, to keep making money, cooking classes, or just all sorts of things, all sorts of things. And they just invented all of these things to do that actually ended up making them more money than ever. Now they've got so much money, they're building a brewery. I'm serious, right? And you see, you compare that to other people that just go, oh, we have to shut down. Oh, this is a disaster. Oh, you see, it's all coming from outside, right? We're all screwed. We're all,
Incredible.
True
Thank you for
story.
sharing that.
True story.
Yeah.
True story.
Yeah, amazing. Look, where we're coming to the end of the show, William, but just a couple of questions for you before we wrap up. One is, what would you suggest for people today? Obviously, they can check out your work and your book and everything else, but is there like a tip or something that somebody could start with to contemplate about starting to connect to that larger aspect of themselves, that superconscious place?
Well, yeah, you can. You see, the thing is, and no disrespect to you, and I'm not saying anything about you and about your question. I'm just saying that this happens to me in interviews. Not that you're doing it, but this is what people do to me in interviews. At the end of the interview, they go, what's a takeaway that you can give what's a takeaway you can give my viewers or my listeners that can help them, when they negative or in pain or in trouble, or what can you give them to just give them some hope and make them feel better? And my answer is not much, right? Because that is temporary. If I give somebody that, I'm giving them a fish. I'm just giving them a fish, and they'll eat the fish today, but they'll be hungry tomorrow, And they sit here listening to that radio show, that broadcast, whatever, and they get tips every day, and they're still listening because they never went anywhere. They didn't get a tip that goes, oh yeah, okay, I don't have to sit by the radio anymore listening for tips, right? I'm cool. I got it, right? And so here's my tip. And it's, you see, people are very interested in short-term gratification in life. So the tip I've got isn't short-term gratification. It's long-term gratification. It's study this. It's study. You don't have to study with me. You can, and I can make it easy for you because I've done 30 years of study, and I can give it to you on a plate, right? But you don't have to study with me, but study. Know that you create your own reality. Know that you create your own reality. Here's my tip, take responsibility for what's going on in your life because you're creating it. And undertake, because if you do, it will happen. It will happen for you. You will find the way. It will come to you. if you take responsibility and go, yeah, this is my creation, the more you own that and understand or just acknowledge or even use it as a premise. You don't even have to believe it, but use it as a working hypothesis that you creating it. What's going on for you? Take responsibility for that, and that also then gives you the power, and then undertake to figure out how you can change that, because you can change that. You can change that in simple practical ways. You can, but then also they're very long term, ultimately metaphysical ways in which you can change that. And so to me, you see, that's my tip, is take responsibility. Just stop and take responsibility. Don't try and get away and get out of what you're in. That's reactionary, right? That's short term. You're just going to be back there tomorrow. Take responsibility. Don't be short term. Take responsibility. Just stop and go, yeah, how reality is, whether it's bad or whether it's medium or even if it's good, you can still take responsibility for it and become the power, the predominant power in your own life. Learn how to change things so that reality reflects your highest good, your well-being and highest good. Take responsibility and undertake to understand how that works, because it's just an intention. And if you make that intention, it's going to come, because I made that intention and then lessons came my way and teachers came my way and all of that. Of course, I will offer, what I do in my books and courses because they're very convenient. It's all on a plate. My 30 years of learning, trial and error experience is just there on a smorgasbord for you to pick up and eat, and so that would be my advice, really.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. No, it's perfect. It's a perfect way to wrap up the show today, William. I'll make sure the links for your website and your work in the show notes below, whether people are watching this on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify. They just need to pause. If you're listening, there'll be links below if they want to check out your work more, William. Can you say the URL out loud as well for people to find out more?
My website, the URL for my website is naturalsuccessacademy.com. Naturalsuccessacademy.com. But if you Google William Whitecloud, you're going to be taken to my website.
Absolutely.
It's not difficult, yeah. But thanks, Guy. Great conversation. It was a bit of a one-way conversation. I apologize for that, but you got me talking. You're to blame.
No, that's perfectly fine. I'm very aware. I want to invite people on and give space for people to talk. That's where it's there. Then I find as a podcaster, nothing irritates me more when the podcaster keeps jumping in and so I like to listen. You have a lot to share, William, and I really appreciate you coming on today. And I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you for all that you do, and it was great to have you on.
Thank you, and thanks for what you do. You're obviously, aggregating all the knowledge out there, the powerful knowledge out there, and getting it out. So, thanks for your good contribution. I really appreciate it. And thanks so much for inviting me, and thanks everyone for hearing me out and listening, and all power and happiness to you, to all of you.
Thank you.